Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makool with you at BTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at the political situation of the country in light of the Islamabad High Court proceedings today, in which the court has decided to indict PTI chairman and the former Prime Minister Imran Khan in a contempt of court hearing regarding his controversial remarks that he made on August 20th in a rally in F9 Park in Islamabad against the additional and district sessions judge Ms. Zeba Chaudhary. There is, of course, a lot of discussion with regards to this particular verdict. There were a lot of people taking a look at whether or not we'll be seeing this case in terms of the objectivity and neutrality of the judiciary as well, considering, of course, there were talks against the PTI chairman and special treatment being given to him. We also saw earlier that in the previous hearing, the Islamabad High Court also gave the PTI chairman an opportunity to present a well-considered response and to think again on what he has said and done and reform his reply, which was submitted yesterday, and the Islamabad High Court today found it unsatisfactory, based on which he has been indicted, and the charges framed against him will be announced on 22nd of September at 2:30 p.m. We're going to be taking a look at this particular case in terms of the proceedings and the discussions that happened with Imran Khan's counsel and the bench as well, with reference to various issues that were discussed regarding different kinds of contempt of court proceedings. Also the statements given in by the PTI chairman. There was also talks of previous such cases and previous statements of leaders of different political parties, whether or not this particular action or statement amounts to threatening, and then of course issues of also why an unconditional apology was not rendered. Leaving the premises of the Islamabad High Court and talking to reporters, the PTI chairman did say that he was not allowed to speak in the courtroom, which of course was something that the judges remarked after the proceedings were over, and they took 5 minutes to announce the verdict, that the response has been given by his legal counsel. So we'll be taking a look at all of this and what it means for the PTI chairman for the future, and try to understand the legality of the entire case as well. For this and more, I've been joined in the studios, as always, by senior analyst Farooq Batafi, and we've also been joined in the studios by a very special guest, Barrister Safiullah Ghori, who's also a legal expert. Thank you very much, Barrister Safi, for joining us and being a part of the debate. We've also been joined online by Dr. Niaz Murtaza, who's a political analyst, and we'll be joined on telephone line by Barrister Asad Rahim Khan, also a legal expert. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us and being a part of the debate today. Barrister Safi, let me start with you and try and understand, first of all, what has happened in today's proceedings. There is, of course, a lot of conversation with regards to how the court has come to this particular conclusion. Earlier, there was also debate of why another opportunity to reform the reply was given. And now that that appears to have happened, we still didn't see a lot of change from the original reply. There were remarks made by the bench saying that a justification was being given and not a clarification. Can you first comment on this particular reply and whether or not it constituted as sufficient in terms of a contempt of court proceedings? And then when we take a look at what should have happened or could have happened from the PTI side, what do you think could have been a better legal course of action?
So I think the court itself pointed out what the right legal course of action should have been when they wrote in their judgment that the accused has shown no remorse. So what the courts expected was for them to come forward and render an unconditional apology. And to that end, the court also reprimanded Imran Khan. They brought forward a series of judgments. There was, there was the Nihal Hashmi case, the Firdaus Ashikawan case, Shahid Aurangzai case, the Adishar Kavashji case. All of these, to which the court even asked the legal counsel of PTI whether they had educated their client on what these cases were. And the fact that Imran Khan did not have any idea that what was expected of him was to render an apology was itself appalling. So the PTI lawyers kept insisting that they are giving a clarification, not a justification. This was an unnecessary debate. A clarification or a justification is not needed. Right. What needs to be understood is that he crossed a line. Now he admits that he crossed a line because he himself says that he did not know that the judge was a judge and not a magistrate. Once again, a magistrate is also a judge, but he's been giving strange, out of this world kind of explanations. All that's expected is for him to give an apology like everybody else has, and they've been forgiven.
Right.
So the court needs to maintain some decorum. They cannot just go out and give anyone whatever they want whenever they want.
Right, Barrister, I'm glad that you're talking about this. Help us understand this nuance that actually appeared today. The Honorable Court actually mentioned that this is the case of criminal contempt, not judicial contempt. Could you actually elaborate on the difference between the two?
Right.
And especially the consequences of the criminal contempt?
Right. So, in matters of criminal contempt, you are bringing the court into ridicule and to disrepute. In matters of judicial contempt, you are not following a court's order. So, when a court gives you an order, it tells you to, for instance, go vacate a house, you are not vacating the house, that is contempt. And for that, that is still criminal, of course. The court can bring action against you, but that is at a later stage. That is you not having fulfilled your legal obligation. In this case, by directly attacking a court, by bringing a member of the court into ridicule and to disrepute, you are attacking the very institution itself.
And
The
intimidation
court,
also
of course,
somehow.
and that's what the court pointed out, that is it because the judge is not a judge of the Supreme Court or a High Court that they feel that he can get away with it? Because all this entire institution in many ways is a sacred institution. You cannot talk about it, and that's what the whole idea is. That is why you have a legal system.
And consequences? In
this case, of course, charge is being framed. So the charges are being framed under CRPC section 221 all the way to 240, depending on whatever the courts choose. But now, of course, there will be a full-fledged trial. There will be witnesses, people who are brought forward, people who will then attest to the fact. If Imran Khan does not give a 265K application or a 290 application and try and get out of it summarily, if he chooses to contest that entire trial, then it is going to, of course, lead to possible conviction that can also disqualify him from the seat.
Right, and we'll talk more about the options that Imran Khan Sahab has at the moment. Dr. Niaz, when we take a look at what has happened, of course, there was another chance given to the PTI chairman in terms of submitting a different reply and a reformed reply. Considering, of course, the understanding that a former prime minister or the leader of a large political party should have regarding legal matters, especially in terms of contempt of court cases, there is, of course, the question of why an unconditional apology was not rendered. It seemed quite obvious before the first reply as well, and after the reply it became even more obvious with the kind of discussions that have been going on. Of course, there are issues and cases that have been pointed out in terms of the fact that the PTI chairman is pleading ignorant to the fact that he was not aware of that the case was sub judice regarding Shahbaz Gill, and also with regards to this particular issue. Is it a matter of the PTI chairman's own decision or matters of ego, as was also highlighted in the court proceedings today, or is it a matter of his legal counsel? There's also talk that he wasn't advised properly, but of course he is the former prime minister of this country, PTI chairman. He's the leader of a large political party, has been in politics for long. Surely he's not that ignorant regarding contempt of court cases. Right, Dr. Niaz Mirza, we seem to be losing your voice. Can you please unmute yourself? We'll also need to rearrange the camera as well so that we can also see you properly. All right, Dr. Niaz, we'll come back to you, but I believe you've also been able to set. Is it fine now? Can you hear me? Yes. Can you please speak a bit louder? Perhaps raise your volume. Unfortunately, Dr. Niaz, we still are not able to hear you clearly, but we'll come back to you very soon. Let me also welcome in the debate Barrister Asad Rahim, who's joined us. Thank you very much. Asad, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Right. So, Asad, of course, we were talking about the contempt of court proceedings today, and we tried and understand what exactly is a criminal contempt of court. We've seen that there was, of course, an option given, a chance given to PTI Chairman Imran Khan Saab to submit a different reply. When we talk about this particular proceeding, of course, there are a lot of issues and concerns that were raised in the proceeding today, one of which was also with reference to why there wasn't an unconditional apology rendered, something that wasn't in the first reply and also missing in the second one. Why do you think that when we talk about this particular matter, it seems that this was perhaps the only option available with regards to this issue, considering, of course, the fact that Imran Khan Saab did so much so admit to regretting or taking back his words. If that is the case, and if it is the only way forward in a contempt of court proceedings, shouldn't that have been part of the reply? Or do you think that there was something else in the way that the legal counsel or the PTI chairman wanted to proceed in the court today? Could there have been another way?
Most apology. And
yes, Asad, continue. We can hear you.
Right. There are very elements that tell us that if you look at the elements of what constitutes a formal apology, it has to be early, it has to be unconditional, and it has to express remorse in a genuine way. It's unfortunate that this was not taken at the first instance. Is in place. There is nothing that restricts Mr. Khan from tendering an unconditional apology and making sure that this is different from the precedent that we've seen in 2018 with various PMLN leaders. The reason that the courts have taken this statement so seriously, so Mr. Khan is a national leader, his popular repute is known to everyone, and when you issue a statement about a sub judice proceeding and also take the name of a judge expressly, then you might that my statement was misinterpreted. But it is quite clear that you are subjecting the independent institution of the judiciary to popular. Islamabad High Court is giving an opportunity to Mr. Khan, even at this juncture, to tender an unconditional apology. There is a legal difference between an unconditional apology and expressing regret after the fact. So that's what I would say to your question.
Right. Thank you, Asad. And when we talk about, of course, the political implications, of course, of this particular case, Dr. Niaz, I hope we can hear you this time around. Would you like to say something for me, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, but still from very far away. But hopefully, we'll be able to make something out of it. Dr. Niaz, of course, the question still remains, and as Asad was saying, with regards to it being clear that the remorse exists, and then the fact that the statement given by the PTI chairman is something that he actually does regret. That doesn't seem to be something that the court is convinced by. When we talk about an apology, of course, it was quite obviously the very easy way forward. Why do you think this wasn't done by the PTI chairman? What seems to be the issue here?
Well, as I was saying last time, there is the political side, and the image that he's trying to portray of himself is this huge savior who's fighting internal and external conspiracies, and within that image, apologizing to court, he wants to project somebody who's taking on the whole system, the establishment, the politicians, the judiciary, and within that apologizing, sort of, spoils that image. So I think that was one consideration. Then there was also a second legal consideration, which is that there is no guarantee that even if you apologize, the courts are not bound to accept the apology. There have been cases in the past where people apologize, people like Nihal Hashmi, Daniel Aziz Chaudhry, and even after they apologized, their apologies were not accepted. So once you apologize, you are accepting your guilt, and then even then, if the court doesn't accept your apology, then you don't really have a defense to fall back upon. So I think these were some of the consideration, but then now they have 2 weeks to follow. They know for sure that the court is going to proceed with the case. So maybe there might be a rethought, and before the next hearing, they might resubmit a third, written explanation, which includes a more clear, unconditional apology. I think with people like Mr. Hamid Khan, who always have a very high regard for the judiciary and don't like to have, a confrontation with it, they might suggest that. And hopefully, that would, I think, be the right way for him to apologize and then for the courts to accept that apology.
All right. Barrister Safiola, when we talk about an option of apology now, what sort of options exist for the PTI chairman? Of course, now that the Islamabad High Court has decided to indict him and he has been given an option to submit 2 replies, what are the available avenues now for the PTI chairman?
So, if the indictment goes through, then like I mentioned earlier, he can go for summary acquittal. Summary acquittal can be done under section 265K of the CRPC and also under 290A. Summary acquittal is when you don't really need to carry out an entire trial because the court is satisfied that there is no reasonable chance of conviction, and that can only happen if the court satisfies itself that they feel that the ridicule and the disrepute that former Prime Minister Imran Khan brought to the courts has been sufficiently addressed by him. So, if he were to still issue an unconditional apology and the courts were to be satisfied with it, they could accept an application, but this would be an additional application by Imran Khan now. Other than that, his chances of going scot-free like they were today are now gone, and he will have to go through yet another phase before he is finally acquitted if he chooses to go down that path. However, I feel like his behavior as he came out and he complained about not being given a chance to speak before the court might suggest that he wants to continue to push against the courts. And I find it a little appalling that this Islamabad High Court, the full bench of all the 5 judges who were sitting and who were talking to Imran Khan about this matter, are probably the most sympathetic judges in all of Pakistan that Imran Khan can find. These are the very judges who have been consistently giving PTI leaders bails. These are the very judges who have consistently upheld almost every application filed by PTI. And in fact, PMLN has been publicly accusing these very judges of being pro-PTI. So the fact that Imran Khan has chosen to go head on against these members is going to reflect badly against PTI cases in all other courts as well, not just the Islamabad High Court, but matters that are pending in the Punjab High Court, who will now take lessons from what's happening in Islamabad High Court. And if they feel like these matters will get increasingly publicized on the media, if they feel like whatever judgment they give can be brought into disrepute and ridicule, they will continue to be extra stringent with PTI.
Right.
So it's a losing strategy all over, unless the plan here is to go to jail and turn into a hero.
All right, let's talk about that, because you've put an interesting spin on 2 things, because there was a lot of discussion regarding what Imran Khan Saab's body language meant once he exited the courts, and it was quite different from what you have said. Farooq, when we look at the past history and records of the PTI chairman in terms of his response to various cases, in terms of his statements in the recent rallies, and now of course these 2 statements, and in the aftermath of what he's saying now, that he wasn't been given a chance to speak within the court, and like Barrister Safi was saying, perhaps maybe the plan is something different. How do you feel in terms of the aftermath of this particular case hearing? Has something changed or impacted the PTI chairman or his ways or the way that he wants to now proceed, or do you think that these same stances that PTI has carried before will continue?
Right, and Sana, that is a very important question. We all are asking this because today it seemed that he could very easily apologize unconditionally and just go scot-free, as was pointed out. Unfortunately, it seems that he is not properly being advised. First things first, let me just bring up the MS Curiae, Munir Malik, who actually made a very good point. He actually said that there are 2 ways in which Imran Khan Saab walks free. One is that he tenders an apology, unconditional apology. The second one is conduct. And in conduct also, although Munir Malik Saab actually concluded that there was enough penitence in the conduct, I don't think that was quite visible. I mean, when Imran Khan Saab actually came out, he was again complaining. But remember, going back to your question, there are 2 aspects that are possible. One was brought up by our friend here, Barrister, regarding Imran Khan Saab possibly wanting to go to jail and from there becoming a hero. To his own followers, I think he has enough command or influence that he wouldn't need that kind of martyrdom. But there is also a Hitler option, if you know what I mean. When Hitler's putsch failed and he was actually taken to the court, there he actually used that opportunity as his bully pulpit to push his own worldview, and that actually became very popular because some judges were actually crying at that time when he was even being sent to jail. So there are examples and there are bad examples that might have been followed. As I had told you earlier, a few days back, that he should actually apologize, but I don't see him apologizing. At this moment, I think that right now what is happening is he is losing the stitch in time. The kind of stitch in time that saves 9 would have been there even today. But now everything rests with the mercy of the court. Even if he tenders an apology in the next hearing, when he is to be indicted, even then it will be after the fact because a verdict has been given. And it has been found out that he was not willing to actually take responsibility and apologize, right? If he does that, there is a possibility of a burnout. Imran Khan Saab and his supporters keep on thinking that the current populist wave they are actually riding at this moment will last forever. I don't think that is the case. But this country has many problems. Right now, one third of the country is underwater, and then economic crises are there as well. Remember that any kind of disruption or any kind of confusion or any kind of anger can also envelop him as well, because he is also part of the elite. He is not a common man right now. So if you keep on thinking at this moment, or if he is being advised that because you are a popular and a populist leader, you should not cooperate with any institution at all, I can tell you that this country's institutions have enough power to burn you out and make you irrelevant.
Right. When we talk about this, Barrister Asad Rahim, there was also discussion with regards to how perhaps the court can look at the case in light of what has happened around the world. Examples were given also of cases regarding Donald Trump and the way that various options of freedom of speech could be used over here, or the fact that when we talk about how these statements were made within a rally, they don't actually threaten the Islamabad High Court and they can't really have an impact on the court. When we talk about this particular context on how it was said, or whether or not what was said was politically charged, was part of a rally, was the wrong choice of words, or in the spur of the moment, can any of these be any reasonable explanations in terms of how the context should be viewed by the courts as well? Of course, the courts have argued against it, but there have been talks with regards to the judges assisting the bench as well, and with reference to what people have been saying in terms of whether or not such leverage should have been given to the BTI chairman. Asad, are you with us? Right, I don't think Asad is with us. Barrister Safi, if you could take that one.
Right, so I think the primary argument that is being extended by supporters of PTI, lawyers of PTI, and many people who believe that Imran Khan should have been given leverage is that of Article 19 of the Constitution, freedom of speech. However, Article 19 has been defined time and again by various Supreme Court judgments that clearly restrict its ambit, and the restriction of that ambit states that whereas you are free, you cannot defame anyone and you cannot talk about institutions. Those institutions include the judiciary first and foremost, and then of course even our armed forces. So that is it's very clearly a violation of Article 19. There is no explanation one can give, and PTI has in fact not taken that argument in court itself. So that in itself should be sufficient indication that whereas keyboard warriors might go on talking about the constitutional aspects of freedom of speech, the PTI's own lawyers, and they bought a massive team. It wasn't just the amazing Hamid Khan, who was a very seasoned jurist, but also some of the best criminal lawyers in Pakistan who accompanied Imran Khan in this particular case. All of them were of the view that a line has been crossed. They just felt like maybe a clarification or a justification would perhaps be sufficient, which the courts deemed was not.
But I want to understand why this was considered sufficient, considering it seems quite obvious from even our discussion, what is being said earlier, that the option, the way forward should have been an unconditional apology. Was that not advised to Imran Khan Sahab?
I'm fairly certain that it was advised. I don't believe that there was any chance of them not telling him that this all he needs to go and just say sorry. It's fairly obvious, right? I think anyone who is experiencing contempt of court, and lawyers themselves have this going on all the time. I in fact apologized before an honorable court today in the morning when I spoke a bit too loudly, and a judge got angry at me, and I said sorry, and it was an unconditional apology,
Right.
because I did not want to give the impression before the honorable court to anyone that I was disrespecting the court.
Sure.
So it's saying sorry is a fairly easy thing to do for most people. I just feel like the former prime minister is finding the words to be below him, and therefore it's fair to say that either it's a matter of ego or there is an ulterior motive.
All right. Barrister Asad, when we take a look at the court's proceedings, there was also discussion regarding how the former Prime Minister Imran Khan has always respected women and has always stood up for women's rights, and he has also spoken about his respect for women. Of course, there was also statements given on how he did not actually threaten any woman, and he did not mean to say or threaten anything like that. When we take a look at these statements, of course, the fact that the additional judge was a woman came into the discussion, and it has come before as well, to which the bench has said that this is a matter of a district court judge and not the fact that it's a woman or a man. How much do you think gender has a role to play in this discussion and these court proceedings?
Well, I think that the main aspect has to be that there was an attempt to controversialize the independence of the judiciary. And if you are a nationally popular leader and you are making a statement about a proceeding that is ongoing, then the first attempt at delegitimization will be of the judiciary. The gender aspect comes later. I don't think we can be entirely blind to it. But even here, I think the more immediate thing would be that this is a district court judge, and the Islamabad High Court has emphasized again and again today that if this was pertaining to a High Court or the Supreme Court, they might have been less severe in the proceedings. But because this has to do with the court of plenary jurisdiction, and the court where the vast majority of litigation starts and stops, then Mr. Khan has to be a lot more circumspect in his choice of statement. So while there's no reason to overlook the gender aspect, the emphasis has to be that district judiciary is as sacred, if not more sacred, than the High Court and the Supreme Court. To come to your previous question, his current statement was certainly an improvement on the previous, in which he expressed regret, but regret is not the same as an unconditional apology, and that should have been tendered at the first opportunity.
Right. Dr. Niaz, when we take a look at the statements made and the issue of the fact that the remarks were threatening, there are people and the supporters of PTI who are claiming that perhaps it's too far-fetched to say that these remarks could have resulted or amounted to something significant against the additional judge. Would you agree with this particular statement, and also in terms of the kind of statements and language that is usually used in political rallies or by political leaders or people of influence? A lot of it goes without any consequence as well, in terms of how we see the number of people who are being influenced by the statements and the number of followers that one may have. So when we take a look at the consequences that are being pointed out of these statements, would you agree that they are far-fetched, or do you think that this is quite possible, or quite a huge probability that something negative could have happened to somebody that the PTI chairman has used threatening remarks against?
Well, there's a couple of things, repeatedly today, the Chief Justice pointed out to the incident which happened in Medina Munawwara, and he said that, that had happened because of the instigation by some PTI leaders. So that's one thing. Then the other thing is that, a person like Nihal Chaudhary was also punished. So there is a precedent where, even if there wasn't really an intent to, act upon what was being said, courts have taken it seriously. If you ask my opinion, I think such contempt should only be where, there's an actual action, or at least evident that there is a real intent to act upon, a verbal threat. But then if you go by precedent, then obviously there are cases where courts have taken it seriously. But then another point that they've made is that, whether the Islamabad High Court has jurisdiction to hear this case, because, the suo motu is supposedly only for the Supreme Court to, use, and that also only the Chief Justice. So let's see how that point flies and whether they bring it up again in the future.
Right. Barrister Asad, would you like to comment on the fact that what Dr. Niaz was saying in terms of how contempt proceedings should happen if there is an actual intent or actual action taking place?
As far as contempt proceedings are concerned, the indictment is in field, and after this, the courts are going to re-examine the matter as to whether Mr. Khan should be convicted or not. But as far as precedent is concerned, I think the Nehal Hashmi case, in my very modest opinion, is distinguishable. So is Mr. Talal Chaudhry's. Nehal Hashmi expressly threatened the judge's children. He expressly threatened the judges themselves. Mr. Talal Chaudhry compared the judges to stone idols that had to be appended from where they were, called them PCO idols, in fact. So while what Mr. Khan has said is unanimously considered to be irresponsible and merits an unconditional apology, I fear that the comparisons being made to Mr. Hashmi's case or Mr. Chaudhry's case are unwarranted. Having said that, there is an overarching legal principle that flows all the way from Zuhur Elahi's case, where he said that Mr. Bhutto had made a contumacious remark in his speech about the National Awami Party. He had said that the Supreme Court will be responsible for the consequences of the NAP judgment. That principle remains the same, that the courts have to be very, very careful in exercising their contempt powers and do as much as has to be done for maintaining the independence of the judiciary. So there is still space for Mr. Khan to tender an unconditional apology. He should make use of that space before this episode develops any further.
Right. Farooq, when we talk about the issues with regards to previous cases as well, of course, irrespective of the legal aspects of it, there's also, of course, what has been said in various rallies by the PTI chairman in terms of what earlier has been said and what all other political leaders have talked about of different political parties. And for some reason, that seems to be a justification or perhaps a comparison being drawn in terms of how things happened with regards to their statements and what is happening when it comes to the PTI chairman. There was also, of course, a lot of talk regarding the BDM and the current government as well in terms of how perhaps there is special treatment given to the PTI chairman previously as well. Do you think that today's proceedings clarifies that when we talk about previous precedences and previous issues and, of course, the issues with regards to what has been said regarding PTI chairman's special treatment, do you think that that is now clear now for the people?
Right, Sana, I think that what you were referring to is called whataboutism, right? On one side, of course, one does something and then when you are accosted, you say that how about this person or that person, right? That has been happening for quite a lot. But I can tell you two things personally. When it comes to such cases in the past, I have always recommended to everybody who actually was accused, every politician who was accused of contempt of court, and that go and tender unconditional apology, and then I have always prayed that the honorable courts will let them go, right? And that is an important thing to understand, that while if a crime is committed, the people have to be accosted, but there is something else which is very important, and that is the accountability of the elected people is done by the people of Pakistan.
Right. Sorry, Farooq, sorry for the interruption, but we have a breaking news just now, but we'll come back and talk a little bit more about that. But there has been news just now that Queen Elizabeth II has passed away. This news has just come in, and Britain has confirmed this news. There has been 10 days mourning also announced in the aftermath of this death. Of course, this is something which is a big tragedy for the people, and we've seen in the past as well the kind of resolve that had been given previously by the Queen Elizabeth II, and now we have heard the news that she has passed away in Buckingham Palace, and this has been confirmed by Britain. Farooq, when we take a look at this, of course, she was an important figure, and this seems to be a huge tragedy for the people.
Right, absolutely. I think today is a somber day. The Queen had a very long innings, 96 years she actually ruled hearts and minds of British people and democratic world. Her first prime minister was Winston Churchill, right? From there to this day, I think that this long journey has been very fruitful for the people of Britain and of course democracies all over the world. Her role in the World War as well, after the World War, during the Cold War, that was also significant. I think that today everyone mourns with the British people for her passing, and I think it is a somber moment. Today was a somber day. Today in the morning also we heard that one of the senior journalists associated with CNN, Bernard Shaw, had passed away, and then the Queen was ill, and now we have learned that she has also passed away. So today, unfortunately, has been a day of heartbreak, and that was what we were discussing today earlier as well. Our domestic politics is also full of that.
Absolutely. And to tell our viewers once again, Queen Elizabeth II has passed away. Buckingham Palace has announced 10 days of mourning. And of course, this is a big loss for the people of Britain and of course all over the world as well. As Farooq was pointing out, she has been around for a long time and has seen a lot of changes in the world, and of course is a very important figure when we take a look at her history and her achievements and what all she has contributed to. Of course, there are numerous examples that can be given, and it's unfortunate to hear of her passing. Queen Elizabeth II has passed away, and Buckingham Palace has announced 10 days of mourning. We will be, of course, giving you more news and updates as they come in. But as for now, we know that the Queen of Elizabeth has passed away at the age of 96, as Farooq was earlier telling. Barrister Safi, if you would like to say a few words at the passing of Queen Elizabeth II.
It's truly tragic, but I read about her being unwell today, and I was discussing with a friend as to what a wonderful life she has lived. She's obviously lived a very long life, but also one that's very fulfilling. She's ruled over the hearts and minds of not just Britain, but also many countries that were a part of the British Empire. And she was the queen of the British Empire. She was, for the longest time, she's ruled not just over what we know of as the British Empire, but also the Commonwealth. Many people consider her the queen, not just the people of UK, but also in Australia, also in Canada, and so it is a global figure. She was loved universally, and I would obviously remember the fact that she lived a very happy, healthy life for a very long time. I saw an interview of hers 2 years ago in which she said that she still drinks cognac and eats steaks. Yeah. So that's pretty good for a person who's 94 years old.
And there's a clip where she's actually explaining how precious her jewels are, right? And she's actually telling the history of each individual jewel. So that was really heartwarming, the way she communicates with the media, and the way, I mean, this actually brought up memory of my own grandmother, the way she used to explain. But beautiful woman, a great leader. Unfortunate that she has passed away. Nobody lives forever. Absolutely. But of course, she leaves behind a lot of memories, and I think that her impact on history can never be understated.
Absolutely. Dr. Niaz Murtaza, are you still with us?
Yes, yes.
Right. Dr. Niaz, I'd also like to take your comments, of course, on the passing away of Queen Elizabeth II. This, of course, is big news and a big tragedy.
Yes, it's quite a sad news. She had been around for so long that, one just got used to her. And even though she was a ceremonial monarch, the fact of her personality and her popularity meant that, she had a very important role to play in the politics of UK and, all the different Commonwealth countries that came under it. And there were, so many events that happened in the 70 years that she ruled. And she was, a strong figure for the British people in all kinds of tragedies. And obviously she held the royal family together. So it will be interesting to see, what happens now in terms of the acceptance of the royal family and how it handles it and moves on. for the future challenges that, of course, are there. Britain's still going through, a big economic crisis, the break away from the European Union. So there are still so many issues. So let's see how it goes in the future for the royal family.
Right, absolutely. Farooq, of course, there's this loss that everyone feels and will feel for a long time to come. But with regards to what Dr. Niaz was saying in terms of the challenges that will exist or the void that will exist, what sort of issues do you think will be the most immediate that Britain will now be facing?
I think succession is not a challenge. They have a chain of succession, and we know that Prince Philip, not Philip, Charles actually, is going to succeed her. But having said that, of course, there has been a raging debate in UK for quite some time that the monarchy, institution of monarchy has run its course. There are going to be voices that are going to actually reignite that debate. But I think that that won't happen. You know, this is something not merely political, it is something cultural as well. It adds depth and historic depth to the British, culture. So I don't think that this institution is going to be imperiled. Of course, there's a somber moment. They are going to actually observe these days of mourning, and then there's going to be a transition of power, or whatever remains of that power, as was said by Dr. Niaz Mirza. But let me also actually just mention a couple of things. The way she was covered in the popular media or popular entertainment is also great, right? On one side, you have the Crown, that is a beautiful expose on her life and of the Crown itself. But then, when you talk about sitcoms, also, there's a very interesting series called The Windsors, right? Now the amazing thing is that Prince Charles is in there portrayed. Others are there, but they have never included the Queen. So there was so much respect. They never thought that she can be made part of some kind of jocular, presentation. I think that a lot of people will be really sad today.
Right, and when we talk about, of course, the kind of aura that was attached to the person also of the Queen, there's obviously, of course, as you said, succession to Prince Charles, but then, of course, there's a lot that is attached to the personality of Queen Elizabeth herself, which perhaps may not be able to be succeeded by Prince Charles. There's, of course, also the fact that how exactly will that carry out, as you pointed out. But when we take a look at the way that a particular person and its charm carries forward, that of course will be something that we'll keep on missing. Yes, Barrister, if you want to add something?
So, speaking about the challenges that the UK is going to face, well, obviously succession, Farooq Saab has already mentioned that it's not going to be an issue. There's a clear line of succession, but there is a much bigger issue, and that is the succession of Scotland. The Queen bound the country together, the United Kingdom together, Scotland and England, and the Queen was that figurehead who was responsible. Because she was Scottish, and the Scottish people also loved her quite a bit. Right now, we have the most unpopular Prime Minister the UK has ever seen, Liz Truss, only a 12% popularity rating, and Nicola Sturgeon has gone on record to state that it is the monarchy that is right now the only binding factors between them. And so I feel 2023 we will see another Scottish referendum, and this time the Scottish National Party will come back swinging with much more force, and then perhaps people would think about the legacy the Queen has left and how the Queen was binding not just the royal family but also the United Kingdom together.
Right. And speaking of challenges, you have to talk about the challenges that are going to be faced by the new monarch. Remember that the Queen, when she actually ascended to the throne, she was one of the youngest, monarchs in Europe, right? And compared to her of that time, of course, there have been, instances of infants actually becoming kings as well. But she, in comparison to that, Prince Charles or King Charles now is going to actually join the ascent to the throne at a very late age, and of course that with all the baggage he carries, of course it is going to have an impact. But I don't think at this moment, I do understand that Europe is really in a bind because of economic conditions and because of the economic downturn facing Europe because of the war in Ukraine. There are going to be consequences, and of course policies are going to be unpopular. But as I said earlier, I don't think that there is going to be an immediate threat to UK. or there is going to be any serious threat to the institution of monarchy.
All right. Yes, Barrister Safi.
I feel once again, if one was to think of the UK, one immediately thinks of slogans like "Long live the Queen." One immediately thinks of the tiara, leaden crown that the Queen used to wear. These were symbols that defined the UK and the UK and the British culture in general. We've had Queen Elizabeth, before her Queen Victoria. So what we've seen in the United Kingdom for the longest time is a matriarchal figure, and for the first time in a very long time, we have a man coming. And I think that in itself is going to be a culture shock for the British people.
Right, that's an important aspect that you pointed out. Dr. Niaz, I'll take your take as well at the end. Of course, we've talked about how perhaps the successor will not be able to command as much respect or position or authority that we have seen Queen Elizabeth command over the years. And then, of course, there's the aspect of a man coming in as well, as Barrister Safi was pointing out. How much do you think will this be a problem and difficulty for Prince Charles, considering, of course, everything else in the situation as well?
Well, I mean, Queen Elizabeth had a very sweet personality and a very likable personality. And that's not true for King Charles. He's more withdrawn and he doesn't have the same kind of popularity. So one aspect is, all the infighting that has been happening within the royal family, how he will be able to handle that. And then, beyond UK, there's the issue of the Commonwealth. Already in the last 4 or 5 years, 3 or 4 countries left, partly because of this royal infighting and other reasons from the Caribbean. So how much Charles will be able to hold together the Commonwealth and give it a sense of identity? These will all be challenges. And as Farooq said, he's not a very young guy. He's not very energetic. He's already about 75 when he takes over. So these
or
are
even
some
popular.
of the challenges that we're facing.
Or even popular.
Yeah.
Please go ahead, sir.
Right, absolutely, Dr. Niaz. Thank you very much for those comments and for joining us in the debate as well. Thank you very much, Barrister Safiullah, for being a part of the show and coming to the studios. And of course, thank you for being with us in the studio today as well and being part of the debate. That's all we have. Of course, it remains to be seen what is going to happen, but we're all, of course, very, very sad to hear about the demise of Queen Elizabeth II, and of course our hearts goes out to the people in Britain, to of course the family as well, and to everybody around the world who loved and respected her. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.